So here we are. We are now live, Chris. Fantastic. It is awesome to see you. We had about, I think, 2 minutes in the preamble before we turned on screen. So ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are listening live, please use the comment section. We want questions. We want feedback. We want challenge and argument. We want anything that you've got for us. Today, we have a very special guest because Chris, I said guest, Chris is the CEO and founder, I believe, of your company, right? And you tend to deal more in what I call the human side of cybersecurity. So you include physical security in. So give us 30 seconds of what your company offers people, please.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So we are, the name of the company is All Points Investigations. We're out of Florida. We have a global outreach. We offer cyber investigations as well as physical investigations for individuals and Fortune 100 companies across the globe on various topics, counterfeiting, social engineering engagements, lots of different types of things that we do.
Beautiful. Let's say hello to Miguel, who is a colleague of mine. Miguel, part of the office of the CTO and a fellow New Jersey guy. So hello, Miguel. Where are you dialing in from today, Chris?
I'm out of Tampa.
You're out of Tampa, but you're all over the world. So Chris had just mentioned in the 2 minutes preamble that we had prior to this call that he's kind of like, you know, guts to the wall, 80 hours a week, going crazy. You just finished a keynote in Las Vegas. And you just gave me the title, and I want to dig into this. The keynote in Las Vegas was on scams for romance scams, right? Romance scams. Let me just say hello to RC. RC, sorry your name isn't up there, but sometimes LinkedIn doesn't show it. I see you on my phone. Thank you very much for dialing in. Hello, everybody. I just want to do quick hellos to as many people as I can. I would like to get to all of you, but yeah, definitely hellos from around the world. And thank you very much for tuning in today, Ganesh, everybody else. So you were at a conference keynoting for romance scams. Like, give us the 30-second overview, and then I'm going to start drilling into this. This is interesting to me.
It's very interesting. That's why I was very thankful that they offered me the opportunity to talk about romance scams. So I was in Vegas as one of the keynote speakers there at a large event, talking about crimes in general, but a lot of it had to do with online crimes. And certainly with online crimes comes romance scams. And we do a lot of investigations on romance scams. We also do cult, C-U-L-T investigations. And kind of some of that kind of hinges on the other. But yeah, romance scams are very terrifying because the most of that effort is, romance scam is the effect of social engineering. And in my opinion, social engineering is very powerful and very terrifying because it pulls on the heartstrings of all of us. It doesn't matter what you are. It doesn't matter if you're a CIO or a CISO. It doesn't matter what, or me. It doesn't matter who we are. In the end, when we hang up our hat and we lay down in bed, we're all human. So therefore, we all have hearts. Therefore, we have heartstrings that can be pulled, and we can drop our guard because we think the person in front of us, whether it's online or literally in front of us in the real world, is delivering this pretext to us that we buy in on. And they've done so very pointedly by learning about us, by engaging us socially online and without our knowledge of that, because of the exposure that we all have. So it's a really well-oiled machine that these guys and gals engage upon us across the globe. And they're these fantastic operations that are well resourced as well as finances and educational systems. Like these folks in our engagements of these types of situations when we investigate, they literally have online repositories that they educate one another. They have online vlogs, they have online blogs, they have open and private social media groups on the platforms that you can think about, that they educate one another. We have uncovered literally resources that are tagged how to get a Caucasian male from the US to send you $5,000. Click on this link and it gives you a whole pretext on how to do that. And then another, I mean, this is an enormous pantry list that we've uncovered on them educating one another. They're great at networking. They're masters of disguise. Plain and simple, they're not who they say they are. And that's the main concern. They're not who they say they are. Almost doesn't matter who they are, it matters who they're not. Because who they are not, you're buying in on who they are supposed to be. right? And then the
Right.
effect unfolds. I mean, we had a case where we helped a person. She was in her 70s, a widow, and she had lost her husband. Within 30 days of losing her husband, this half-wit sprouted up from Facebook and said, "Hey, I'm sorry for your loss. Let's talk." And they always start lightheartedly. "Hey, I'm sorry for your loss," whether it's a loss of a dog or a loss of a job, or you're new to moving into a different state or country, or certainly you've lost your partner. Always lighthearted conversation. "Hey, I'm really sorry about that. Let me know if you need anything." And it grows from there. I can't say this enough. They're really masters at this kind of engagement that they have for you. Fast forward to a short amount of time and they're asking you for money, and then they ask you for more money and more money. And our client, unfortunately, she had given this bad actor over $300,000
Oh,
for
man.
very hard-earned money. And not only that, but it was a large part of her inheritance from her husband that
Oh,
died.
wow. So I'm going to get to a question in a minute. I've got some housekeeping items and some hellos in the comments, so I want to hit that. And the question I'm going to have for you is something along the lines of, how does the threat actor go from the lighthearted, "I'm so sorry you lost your husband," to $300,000? That's probably a life savings, this poor lady. And were you able to recoup some of it? Now, let me just hit a housekeeping item. Thank you, RC, for the reminder here. There is going to be a survey toward the end of our dialogue today. On that survey, we are going to offer you free security checkups. There's going to be all sorts of information on how to prevent social engineering. And of course, we've got a cup of coffee at your desk, a $20 Starbucks gift card for being part of our little team today. We've got an international audience. Hello, Stephanie from the UK. Hello, Paul from Italy. Hello, Jeff from Winnipeg, Canada. I hope you're warming up over there, buddy. I used to live in Calgary. We've got folks from Israel, most likely our head office, also from India, Pakistan, Detroit, and I suspect we have quite a few hundred people from the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area where we advertised for this particular dialogue today. So, yeah, how do we go from, I'm sorry, and the disgustingness of these threat actors is still, I know, this is what we deal with every day, but it still kind of hurts to hear this kind of stuff, this poor 70-year-old lady. So how do we go from "I'm sorry your husband, you lost your husband," to "I want $300,000"? And how quickly did the threat actor get to that point?
So it's very surreal to me, to you, to everybody on this webinar, because we're not engaged in the situation. We're not engaged in the conversation. And more importantly, we're not emotionally charged in the situation. So I tell everybody, it has nothing to do with intellect, because I see this and I'm like, why would you do that, right? You say that you see this and you're like, why would you do that, right? But it has, and some of us, not me, but some of us, they say, "Oh, well, that would never happen to me," right? "I'm too smart for that." It has nothing to do with intellect. It has nothing to do with your skill set and even street knowledge, because the person that's the victim is emotionally charged in the situation. You're emotionally vulnerable. And at that stage, your intellect goes out the window. At that stage, your guards go out the window, because you're emotionally charged in this. And in fact, so we let a lot of things go, right? And in fact, the case that I cited to you, the victim that we try to help out, was she had mentioned to me a couple of times that she had some kind of mental checkpoints to say, this is weird. I'm not sure if this is the guy, right? If this is the person he says he is. But she let it go, because she's like, I care about him. He calls me, I don't know, I think she was up to 10 phone calls with him on a regular, on an everyday basis.
Wow.
Just like, hey, how's it going? Hey, just want to say good morning to you. Have a great day. And then they would continue on separate phone calls. So, I mean, these people, I can't say this enough, Eddie. They're masters at what they deliver to you, the context of the situation. They're masters at controlling the conversation. They're always a step ahead with the context of it as well. And, they know what to say. And before you know, it's kind of like drawing a line in the sand, right? Hey, don't cross this line. They cross the line. Well, you back up. Don't cross this line. It just perpetuates that way. And it's so foreign for me, for you, for everybody on this webinar to say, why would you do that? It's so surreal there. But again, we are detached emotionally from the situation. And if any one of us, I hope none of us, but if any one of us engages in a situation like that, we will be fast to understand that wow, it has nothing to do with intellect. Doesn't matter if I'm a cybersecurity expert. It doesn't matter.
Right.
We're emotionally charged, and that's how we're roped in.
So tough. It's so difficult to talk about these things because I feel so much for the victim. At the same time, when I talk about, we have to talk about how to prevent this kind of stuff. And so we, in a sense, use the victim as a case study. It feels cold, so with respect to the victim, I wonder if does this person have really good friendships? Because I seem to think that a stranger all of a sudden going to 10 phone calls a day is a reflection that perhaps that victim has a lonely life. Do you see a correlation there that makes causation?
So the FTC very recently has put out a number that in 2021, Americans, U.S. folks, have been affected by romance scams to the tune of about $550 million. The FBI has estimated, not real numbers, but estimated that all of last year, 2021, Americans, people in the U.S. Have been hit by romance scammers to the tune of $1 billion. Now, I personally believe that those numbers are severely truncated because depending on what report you read, victims report being a victim of a crime anywhere from 6% to 40% of the time. So let's give those numbers the benefit of the doubt and say they're reflective of 40%. At a minimum, you're doubling that number.
Right.
So it is an absolute, and that's just in the States. So it's an absolute global problem. To your point, we got to make sure that the education is out there, because if I'm saying to you folks, hey, it doesn't matter how smart you are, if you're roped into this, kind of good luck, right? Not so much, but a little bit. So how do we do that? How do we get somebody to reflect on what's going on and take themselves out of that situation, even a little bit momentarily, to kind of mental check like my victim had, but kind of go with that gut instinct instead of, well, I love him, right? So how do we do that? And you said it very perfectly. We got to get the education out there. So when, I hope not when, but if or when we're faced with a situation like that, we're being initially hooked on something like that, we can back up and say, well, we're not emotionally charged, and we can back up and say, hold on, wait, this kind of doesn't make sense here, right? Or at least promote a healthy sort of awareness on this, not to inflate any kind of paranoia across anybody that reaches out to you. Hey, I want to be your friend. No, it's not about that. It's about installing a healthy sense of security on what to look for before you're engaged in the situation.
Because the irony there is that if people are so scared, they are going of any stranger, they're going to isolate themselves even more and be more susceptible to a scam. That's the irony. Gavin DeBecker puts this quite well in his book, Gift of Fear, right? He uses an analogy. You mentioned it too. You said you trust your gut. That's an interesting thing, especially for us cybersecurity folks that are the ones listening to this right now, right? Because we're kind of ones and zeros people. We're not about emotion and gut. We have it. We often don't talk about it. We're not perhaps in tune with it because we are ones and zeros type people. We're technologists. This is why we've been drawn to cybersecurity, and you, of course, drawn into physical as well as cybersecurity. So the example that DeBecker gives in his book is this: if let's say you're a young lady, and you work late at the office, in a high rise, and it's 10 o'clock at night, you're the only person, you're leaving the office, you hit the elevator doors open up, and there's a large gentleman. That's it, large gentleman right there. And your gut tells you, I should wait for the next elevator. But you don't want to offend that person. So that line you mentioned about your victim, you back off of that line once, and you think, well, I don't want to be rude. This is just a guy, right? So I'll get into a steel soundproof box with a complete and utter stranger because I don't want to offend him. Really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Now, what's the science though with the gut feel? That's the challenge.
Well, sure. So for generations and generations and even longer than then, right? Than that, our instincts have kept us safe. Our instincts have gotten us to, whatever time that you want to start zero of the human race to current days. I mean, we're here because we survived, right? I mean, the first primal instinct for every single one of us, devoid of what you do in life, is to survive. And how did we survive? We survived back then, prior to our wonderful educational system that we have nowadays. We survived by listening to ourselves, by listening to that conscious, by listening to that feeling that's like, I'm not sure about this, right? I mean, how many detectives, myself included as an investigator, listen to our gut instinct on like, you know what, at this point, I don't have evidence to prove this, but I have a feeling, and you go down the pathway of that feeling. And the idea is that you uncover evidence to really solidify your initial thought. Now, sometimes we can be wrong 100%, but wouldn't you rather be wrong and alive than be right and having some unfortunate situation? It's very critical that we can kind of listen to ourselves. And unfortunately, romance scams are really lucrative. They're very lucrative, and they're put together by individuals in certain sections of the world, but a lot of them are traced back to Western Africa, and they call them cafe boys. Why do they call them that? Because literally they're at a public cafe, like a Starbucks or something like that. They're at a public cafe all day long, just trying to get money from people across the globe. A lot of times it's concentrated, their efforts are concentrated in the US. But they literally sit at a cafe, stare at a screen, and try to get information and try to get money from people. And then when some of these folks, a lot of them are hard to identify, but the couple that have been interviewed saying, hey, why do you do this? I mean, you're talking early 20s, you're talking teenagers that engage in this, and they say, hey, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I don't have, the economy's junk here, and I have to put food on the table, help my mom and dad put food on the table. I have to, raise myself. And they say, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I want to take these illicit funds that I'm getting from these romance scams, and I want to be a business person. I want to be a legitimate business person. So I'm going to take these funds and roll it into a company that I want to open and be a good person, right? I mean, it's just surreal that this perception that they have, but that's the perception. Perception is reality, right? That's the perception that they have in their economy. They have to do what they can to get the money, and they feel bad for us sometimes. I say us as in like the victims and kind of the whole lot of prospects, but they feel bad, but they're like, you know what, I got to make a living somehow. So we're going against the grain of a real different perspective, and that's hard to battle. It's not just, hey, let's get this guy or gal, right? Because there's females too. But we're going up against a whole kind of different institutional mindset. And that's really rough to do sometimes.
Well, my response to them is screw those guys, because if you are going to start earning money through illegitimate means, it's easier money, and then you've got the bug. You're corrupted, and that's pretty much the end. You belong in jail. I'm very unforgiving when it comes to that kind of stuff. But it's important, I think, to understand, right? The way these people think. We have similar things in the pure cybersecurity realm, where, look, we have an incident response team headed up by a wonderful chap of ours called Dan Wiley. He created this entire department. And so he says the very first phone call, which is always free because people are under duress, is kind of like wrapping a warm blanket around the, the customer. And one time, we were working with an organization. I mean, listen, the nerve of these threat actors, right? And so this speaks to the point you were just making. One time we were working with the customer. The FBI were there. Now, the customer had decided to pay the ransom. Now, we don't advise that, but we're also not the victim. So we actually don't, we're neutral as Switzerland when it comes to whether you should or shouldn't pay. We are going to support you. FBI recommends no. I personally recommend no. But again, I haven't been the victim, so no judgment, right? So this organization decided to pay the ransom. It was pretty hefty, I think in the 7 digits. And it was just a little challenging getting the Bitcoin wallet sorted out and the such like. So there was an 800 number to call the threat actors for technical support to make payment into their Bitcoin wallet. When they called the number, obviously the FBI right there listening, right? We're there too. The person that picked up the phone, we know it bounced through to Eastern Europe. We see a lot of this in Eastern Europe, former USSR type countries. It bounced around, and the person who picked up the phone had perfect English, really friendly female voice, better than the kind of service you get from your local telco in the United States, right? And when the victim had made the payment, the threat actors issued a receipt, and on the bottom of the receipt it said 50% discount coupon if we get you again. Yeah, maybe that's their little bit of conscience. Again, you know, screw those guys. I have a hard line with them. Let's get to a few comments. Noel from the United Nations, thank you so much for dialing in. Noel is very familiar with the kind of work you're doing and the kind of work I'm doing across the world. And we have lots of love hearts from various different parts of the world, from Detroit and Pakistan. And so, yes, hello. Now, listen, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi from Puerto Rico. I got to say hi to them. I'm half Puerto Rican.
Oh, yeah, you buddy? Okay, there you go. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I love saying hello. It's great. Please jump in, though, with comments and questions. Let's start pivoting the dialogue, Chris, to prevention, right? So Check Point has set its face, I think, really against the industry for the last 25 years and said, look, prevention is better than detection. Yes. Now, you know, there's a whole dialogue we can have there for an hour, and I've got an entire keynote on it myself, but we are the prevention company. We say prevent all unknown as well as known threats out there. So when it comes to social engineering, there are kind of 5 disciplines that I think people need to be familiar with. And I want you to either rip them apart or agree with them or add to them. All right, my friend? So in social engineering, one is baiting. Now, baiting is kind of like, you know, enticing ads that lead people to a malicious site. In last year, 2021, the most spoofed brands up until recently were Microsoft, WhatsApp, Google, and I think Amazon. About 4 weeks ago, LinkedIn has now become the #1 imitated brand for threat actors when it comes to baiting. And I suspect the reason is because a threat actor's going after, let's say, Facebook. Well, that's a crap shot, right? You're rolling the dice. Maybe you get somebody with money, like this poor victim, 300 grand. Maybe you get somebody who, you know, like my cousin who has 2 cents to rub together. Like, good luck trying to get money out of that guy. But on LinkedIn, well, that's where you and I hang out, right, Chris? This is where executives hang out. So more than likely, you're going to have a higher probability of hitting a jackpot. So that's baiting. Then there's also scareware. Okay, so this is the second thing, scareware. Scareware is like legitimate looking pop-up banners displaying ads or really messages such as your computer may be infected with a harmful virus. Click here and we're going to sort it all out for you, right? They'll pretend to be Norton, they'll pretend to be Checkpoint, they'll pretend to be whoever, right? So that's scareware. It's alarming. It's like in your face. You've got a virus. Click here now. Pre-texting is similar to scareware, and this is the third point in social engineering that I want to either challenge you or get your feedback in. Pre-texting is like impersonating a coworker, but typically somebody in authority, right? Impersonating your CEO or impersonating a police officer, because that is related to scareware. It scares you. It's like, oh crap, right? This is my boss. This is a police officer. I have to obey, right? So I'll do whatever it is they're asking me to do. Then, of course, there's phishing and spear phishing, which are kind of in line. So the fourth and fifth. Phishing is the most popular attack we see. 81% of breaches in 2021 came from originated with an email phishing campaign. So that's the majority of breaches out there. And, you know, this is basically sending people a link to change their passwords, these kinds of things. And then they go ahead and put their credentials in. Spear phishing is simply, instead of casting a whole net over an entire company, let's say you're attacking IBM, 300,000 employees, spear phishing, I'm attacking the CEO, right? Or the CFO of IBM. I'm using a spear. I'm very targeted. All right, buddy. So those are kind of the 5 disciplines or things I think people should know. What do you think? Like you're the expert there. Either rip it apart, add to it, and then how do we fortify ourselves so that we can prevent being a victim?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all those 5 elements. I mean, depending on who you talk to or what reports you read, you can toss in another one, you can take out some. I mean, I think holistically, there's a lot of key points that we need to focus on, both in the kind of expert realm and kind of the ripple effect, the people that we're preaching to, right? Because 100%, it's always more cost effective to engage in something proactively than it is to do so reactively, because you have a major mess to clean up with the latter. So the promotion of all the 5 elements that you had said, yes, 100%. And a lot of those fall underneath the larger heading of social engineering. Social engineering is and I apologize, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but social engineering is directly engaging with the person to have them do something other than what they would do if they knew that Chris wasn't Chris, right? So making the person engage in activities that they wouldn't if they really knew the identity of the other person, or at a minimum, if they didn't know the identity, but they knew that that person was not who they say they are,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to know who somebody is. You just have to know that who they're not, right? But social engineering, depending on what report you read, is utilized in anywhere between 95 to 98% of all attacks. Cyber attacks, additional social engineering kind of effects, such as romance scams, right? So social engineering is absolutely huge. And in my opinion, it's more terrifying because anyone can engage in social engineering. You don't need a technical background to do so. You need a technical background to be a hacker, but you don't need one to be a social engineer. And someone can social engineer you in person in the real world, or they can do so online. There's a crossover effect there. And I talk all the time about that kind of nexus, and I call it a nexus between the cyber world and the physical world. You have people engaging you in the cyber world, building a nexus to enter into your life on a physical world. And that's when the most harm can come. They can enter into your real world life, find out where you live, show up at your doorstep, and do some real physical damage to you. There was a case, I think it was last year, if not last year, then the year before, I can't remember, but there's a case in Japan where this individual, he was really enamored with this female pop star in Japan. And he was an older guy, maybe like mid-20s, something like that. And she was younger. And he wanted to meet her. So what he did was he went on all of her social media platforms that he could discover, and he started analyzing her selfies, her photos. And what he would do, and this is the terrifying part, what he would do was he would zoom up the picture, and he would drill into her pupils, her irises, and he would look at the reflections in her eyes, go to Google Maps, try to figure out where she was when she took those photos. I mean, this is the intricacy of these bad actors. How the hell do you combat that, right?
Yeah.
You can't, unless all of your selfies are in a dungeon, kind of like where I'm talking you to from, or some dark room. You can't battle against that. The best thing that you can do is install awareness, install education, again, on the front end to minimize, your posts, to minimize your allowance to let people connect with you across different spectrums. It's terrifying to think of how much of a degree these bad actors go to engage with me and you on a personal level, whatever it may be, to get money from our company or to get money from us as individuals.
Yeah, I want to drill into what you were saying at the beginning of the call, and you mentioned just a few moments ago too. So this is great for us technologists that are listening to this, because this is the human side of security, right? Which is with cybersecurity, obviously hand in hand. And you said, I guess in my words, you said, look, who are they not? That's an interesting question, right? Because I think we waste time by trying to figure out who they are, and that's distracting and allows us to keep getting pushed back from that line, which our gut tells us not to cross. If we knew who they are not, which is likely they're not a friend, then we wouldn't allow ourselves to get pushed by that line. So talk to me a little bit more about that. How do we get people kind of jazzed up and excited? And I'm going to get to a comment here in just a second, so that can be an immediate flag that goes up. This person is not, as opposed to who the hell is this person? Let me get to a couple of comments here. I agree with you, Jeff. Very, very creep factor is off the charts on that one with the pupils. And then LinkedIn is Blair. So Blair's saying, if we were as dedicated with security as these guys are at stalking, we could do amazing things. Unfortunately, Blair, absolutely right. So how are we going to throw up a flag for people to say, who are they not? I think that would be helpful.
100%, because plain and simple, it matters more who they're not than who they are. Now, who they are, particularly in romance scams and other social engineering aspects, it's hard to come by sometimes. I can't say this enough, folks. We are battling an institution. Okay, it's not one person. It's not the one person that reaches out to me, to Eddie, to my victim that I told you folks about. It's not that. It's about the whole operation there. So sometimes we can't identify who's hitting that enter button to send you that message, but that doesn't matter, right? What matters is they're not who they say they are, which has allowed you to drop your guard and give them money, or allowed you to drop your guard and give them information on your company. Hey, it's a whole host of things that they offer. You think somebody's calling you, it's a female calling your company and saying, hi, I'm sorry, I got a meeting with the HR director I had a meeting about 30 minutes ago. I'm really sorry, but my car broke down. My kid's in the back crying. And they'll literally, this is not Hollywood, folks. They'll literally have audio of a baby crying in the background. They'll be like, I'm really sorry, I can't get to my email and stuff, but can you tell me the phone number of the HR director? I just need to call him and stuff. And now to shut something like that down, that context is a little cold, because you want to help. If you had a real person contacting you in that real situation, you'd want to help that person.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's manufactured. And then again, we're all human. We have heartstrings that are pulled on. We say, okay, let me give you the phone number. You have to make sure that you stick with your protocols, because they engage and they hope, they want you to negate your protocols. Don't give the phone number out to the HR director, right? Don't give the direct email out to the HR director. Right. You got to make sure that you stand that up. And honestly, folks, we're all human. Again, a real situation like that delivered to us, we want to help. I would want to help. You might feel crummy hanging up the phone and say, I'm sorry, but this is our process. How else can I help you, right? Or I'll let him know you're coming. Give me your information stuff. And she's like, I'm really sorry, I need that. You might feel crummy hanging up the phone, but you need to know that you might be saving your company a whole lot of heartache and money, and maybe even yourself.
Yeah, that's right. I like to say, look, I'm a connoisseur of the English language, or of language. And I like to say, we need to weaponize words. And you just did that for our audience. You basically gave people the weapons, the words, the flaming sword, to manage this, which is that, I'm really sorry this is happening to you. Give me your number right now. I'm going to call my HR director, and help is on the way. Now, I still feel good about helping that person actually, right? Yes, but if you don't have that that little tidbit of information you just gave people, you weren't able to weaponize the dialogue back in your favor, because that's what the threat actors are doing. This is the way we must look at it. They are weaponizing your emotions, weaponizing words in order to accomplish their goals. So, wow. Okay, I'm really blown away. We've got all sorts of people, I think, blown away too. James is saying frightening, the lengths that some people will go to.
100%. And one of your watchers had said, if these bad actors deployed their efforts for a good cause, this world would be fantastic. And I agree wholeheartedly. Sure, I'd be out of a job because I wouldn't be chasing bad folks down, but I'd be happy. I would maybe be a clown or a juggler or something like that, but this world, it's just amazing. I mean, that guy in Japan literally zooming in to study the reflections in this lady's eyeballs to see where she was. I mean, again, how can you combat that? How the hell can you stand up yourself, these guards, so people can't penetrate your life? So on the front end, again, it's very important to get this education out, to have those checkpoints, those mental checkpoints to say, this might seem a little fishy on the front end before you emotionally involve.
Well, this disgusting creature in Japan, unfortunately for the victim, she's high profile. Yes. So, that's, and not to say anything other than likely she has more creeps doing that kind of stuff than, your average next door neighbor. Mm-hmm. Again, not a justification. These guys are creeps. We should bury them under the prison. But know yourself, I think, is likely a good one. Like, you work in the Department of Finance. You've got high profile. Just know that. If you work in the Department of Finance of Bank of New York Mellon, whoever it might be, you are a target. So now all of a sudden you just start to be cautious, not paranoid, cautious. So and then you get these little tidbits of information that Chris has just given, and I'll give you another one. If you work in the Department of Finance and you're responsible for wiring money, okay, that's your role. All right. Forget the reply button on your email. Just forget the reply button on your email. Here's why. And when a threat actor, and they spend a lot of time studying organizations, there is intelligence to show that threat actors, once they've penetrated an organization, will study that organization for an average of 211 days without doing any breach. They're just in there without stealing information or stealing whatever it might be. So they've breached is what I mean. But they're sitting there and they're studying what is the style of writing of the CEO? What is the style of writing of the CFO and their bankers? And they get in between emails, and then suddenly they get in between at a chance where, let's say, the CEO or the CFO just got on a plane, they're on a 12-hour flight, they advertise this on LinkedIn, I'll be seeing my customers in 12 hours in Tokyo, right? So now the threat actors know they're going there, and that's when they make their move. They make that phone call to you, the person in the Department of Finance, and they say, hey, this is blah, blah, the CEO, I need you to move the money to here. So when you forget the reply button, what you do is you click forward. So you think you're replying to your CEO, but you click forward and you type in the known trusted email address that you've been using for the last 10 years. The same with the banker. Don't click reply ever. It takes an extra second, but that is the responsibility that you must shoulder as somebody who is targeted in the Department of Finance. So then you start to think about the rest of your lives, everybody else that has, responsibilities. Well, where would I be targeted? That one's business email compromise, which the FBI states is about a $7 billion a year problem, right? So $7 billion in the United States alone gets sucked out of our economy to threat actors from what I just told you. And if you would forget the reply button and only click forward, you're probably going to eliminate a good 70-80% of your business email compromise. We've got some couple of other comments here. Yeah, okay. Hello there, Stephanie. Yeah, the Japan, very scary. I know, my friend. So we could all potentially, though, be victims like that star in Japan, that young lady. Yes. And what I mean by that is, unfortunately, now you tell me if you would corroborate this, Chris, because I've heard this, but I haven't seen the statistics. Unfortunately, most crime, unless you're this high-profile person, is perpetrated by somebody you know or knows you, somebody within your network. Would you agree?
100%.
Yeah. So then so let's say it's a next door neighbor or somebody like that. My recommendation, and let's see what you might be able to add to this, Chris. My recommendation would be, look, it's the old adage of if you put a bunch of bars up on your window, but your next door neighbor doesn't have bars, the threat actors wants to have an easier time is likely going to go next door. It's not 100%. That's my feeble attempt at saying, look, you need to fortify yourself, because most violent crime is by somebody you know. Yeah. So what else can we do here? And let me just get to a LinkedIn user that is Mukesh saying, don't pick up the phone if it's not saved, if it's not a saved number, is I think.
Well, I can't do that because I have a business. So
right. It's not for everybody. And I'm in sales and marketing. So yeah, same thing. So what else can people do you think?
Yeah, you're talking about kind of layers of security, right? The next door neighbor without the bars has a lock on their doors, right? But that person with the bars has a lock and the bars, right? So then the bad actor is going to go for kind of the lower hanging fruit, so to speak. And the different layers of security are always important. You folks talk about them in cybersecurity, right? We talk about them in cybersecurity, but it's also the physical world, as easily put as what you just did with the bars on the window. Now, nobody wants to uglify their home to do something like that. But to your point, you still want to install layers of security into your own personal life. I mean, you had mentioned if you're the director of finance at your company, you just want to be diligent with who you engage in at work. But you also want to take it a step further and be cognizant of people engaging you on a personal level, because sometimes a bad actor will seek you out and say, oh, John Doe is the director of finance with ABC Company, right? I want to hit ABC Company. I cannot penetrate ABC Company's security system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to engage John Doe. I forgot the name I gave him already. I'm going to engage John Doe on a personal level. I'm going to try to engage him through his personal Facebook. I'm going to try to engage him personally, not inside the world, the work world, because that bad actor can't penetrate that system. However, if they can go ahead and sift out information from you on a personal level tied to your company, they're going to win out that way. So then you say, well, what do I do? Do I never talk about what I do? Do I never have a conversation about what happened to me at work? No, again, not trying to inflate this world of paranoia, just trying to promote this sense of stable consciousness towards what those bad actors can potentially look for. Talk about your day at work, but just don't give out elements that could potentially weaponize somebody's intent against you, which ultimately leads to your company. Because think about it, folks, and it sounds, if 10 years ago, this would sound glamorized and Hollywood-esque, right? But current days, absolutely not. We have episode after episode across media just saying exactly how these bad actors work. And they do all of these things that we're talking about, hence why we're talking about it. And it's really rough stuff, because we have to guide ourselves accordingly to the security landscape that we all live in these days. And that includes people engaging you on a personal level. We still have fraudsters that literally put in physical mail into your mailbox to perpetuate a scam. People are like, physical mail, yes, because it says, hey, you're awesome. I want to give you a bunch of money. Better words than that. I want to give you a bunch of money, log on to this website, right? But they use the physical mail. People don't think cybersecurity attributed to the physical mail. So it's a guard down, right? It's one lower level down as far as your heightened security awareness. But if you can think of a way for bad actors to get a hold of you, they're going to deploy that in their scam against you. So we just got to be aware of these things.
You're reminding me of the old Greek Trojan horse story, because, okay, so we put up some big heavy bars on our window. In the cyber world, we've got these just beautiful firewalls that are just super thick castle walls, right? Threat actors, it'll take you, 100,000 man hours to brute force, a damn good firewall. So, they're going to use the Trojan horse. It was the same thing, right? So in the old Greek mythology, the Trojans, I think it was Paris of Troy, had abducted Helen of Sparta, right? So Agamemnon got all cheesed off and he brought the Greek army to the shores of Troy. Well, after decades of war, Agamemnon couldn't penetrate the walls. So he pretended to leave, and leaving a horse, which is the symbol of Troy, right? And of course, his assassins were on the inside of the horse. And so when the Trojans opened up their gates to say, lovely gift, we'll just bring this in, you've invited the threat actor in. So, be cognizant of these kinds of things. Now, I want to get to a comment by Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much. This is a great comment, because I'm a little bit more pessimistic and jaded now that I'm older, my friend, because Jeff's saying the majority of these issues can be corrected with education and awareness. Okay, mate, listen, I'm a former English teacher from 20 years ago. And so I was a believer. I don't know as much anymore, because we've got these great technologies out there. And it's not to say we shouldn't. I think not the majority, but I think a plethora, a lot, I don't know, 50%, a lot. So I'm a believer in education still, to be sure. But we know full well, and Jeff, if you are in the cybersecurity department of an organization, you're probably giving phishing awareness training to your people, right? And then what do you do after the phishing awareness training? The very next day, you do a simulation. And then what happens? At least 20 to 40% of your people fall for it, don't they? The very next day. This is my complaint. And there's a problem here. And the problem that we are attempting to address, in a sense, the way we're addressing it, I don't think it can ever be fulfilled. Now, I'm going to get you to respond to this, Chris. This is I'm out there a little bit. How much time do we have? Let's just keep going. The comments are coming in. I love this. So neuroplasticity and becoming a different human being. This is what we need to. So education and training is good, not great. I read a paper by a West Point cadet years ago, right, in the US military, and it was called Drilling versus Training. It's really interesting. So it turns out at the Battle of Gettysburg, and you can see I'm a real patriot, don't tread on me. At the Battle of Gettysburg, it turns out that 90% of soldiers did not even discharge their weapon. That is at the most decisive battle in US history. Now, how do we know this? We know this from the 18,000 fully loaded muskets and full issue of bullets next to each of the fallen soldiers. These poor boys were farmers, and they just hunkered down and just died. I mean, horrific, right? Now, fast forward to the Vietnam War. the US military had completely reversed that trend where 90% of soldiers engaged in a hellfire of battle and ran into danger. How? That's what the paper was about. Drilling, not training. Drilling means simulation all the time. You are essentially changing the neuroplasticity of a human's brain. Unless you have biological change, that's the neuroplastic change, you're not getting behavioral change, because this is how people take the majority of their fishing training, or any other type of training at work. Right. I'm sorry to say, click, 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 click. Let me get through all these boring slides or some patronizing cartoon where I've got some guy telling me about whatever, right? Yeah. Everybody's half smart in a corporation. So you challenge the multiple guess exam, you pass 100%, you're compliant, right? Because we have to have compliance in corporations now, but you have, nothing's changed. Nothing has changed at all. Now, Jeff, I know that's not what you mean by education. So what I think makes your comment majority can be corrected is if you can do this. Here's a hypothesis. And then Chris, I want you to comment on it. My hypothesis is this: 30 seconds of daily drilling is better than one full day of training a month. Now, how we get that 30 seconds, I've got some theories. Yeah. But what do you think, man?
I agree. If you can immerse your people into an environment that really is indicative of what they would be in when they're targeted, that's going to allow for them to walk away with a more impactful experience, and therefore more long-term training, education on the system. But the problem is, we do investigations for Fortune 100 companies across the globe, and the problem is these companies, everybody wants to install a healthy level of security awareness, but they also want to do so to not kind of turn the world of their employees upside down and say, hey, you're going to engage in this hard training, right? Or at least immersive, we'll say. I won't say hard. We'll say immersive, because you've got a receptionist, you've got a janitor, right? Because a lot of bad actors have hit janitors specifically, and they're like, this isn't my world. Why am I doing this? It really kind of turns them off to the situation. So we've got to strike that balance where it's more than just that, monthly awareness of, like you said, multiple choice. I got to get this or HR is going to get on my butt, or my director is going to get on my butt. So we have to strike that balance on, what's not going to scare the employees away, but also what's going to be effective for what we're trying to do. Because in the end, we're not trying to have people check off, hey, I did compliance training. And then when the outside regulators say, have you engaged in, online training? Yes, we have. You're not really just trying to do that. You're trying to really promote the education for your employees to combat a bad actor when ultimately, and unfortunately, sometimes it's inevitably, when they arrive at your doorstep. So if you have these whole kind of more hard-hitting engagements and expectations of your employees, they're going to take that a little bit more closer to heart to help promote your brand. It's not about the training. The training is the point to get there, right? You want to have them adopt a healthy sense of vested interest in supporting and protecting your brand. And I see this all the time. I see corporations that say, oh, well, we have our employees take this online training, just like you said, Eddie, online training on a monthly basis, where like that. And to that, I say, well, okay, what happens if they don't? Well, they get an angry email from their, from HR, from their manager.
It seems punitive.
So what? Yeah, you have to have your training program come with teeth. It has to come with teeth, because if somebody falls short on maintaining that regular expectation of training, there has to be consequences to it. No, you don't have to kick them out the door, but it has to be consequences for them to say, okay, I need to invest in this, not just, dismiss or remind later, remind in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, something like that. Your training has to come with teeth. And then when it is kind of a ripple effect throughout the community inside your company of like, okay, I got to take this phishing training a little bit more seriously, right? Nothing's going to really replace the immersion aspect that you proposed there. I think it's fantastic. But, how do we get to that? That's going to be really rough to do, but it'd be great if we could get there. But at a minimum, folks, have your online training, have your training come with teeth. If people don't do it by a certain day, have real repercussions deployed for people that kind of throw it off and kind of push it off to the side.
And I would say, teeth without being punitive, because then people have an attitude about it. I mean, people need to realize some of these unfortunate stories, and even a janitor, yes, you can be targeted. And when you realize that, and when you realize that the training a corporation is going to give you will also benefit your families and because everything's online today, right? Your online safety. I think that's something that will grab people's attention. I've got some ideas around, arresting people's attention. I mean, look, social media apps are so good at it, right? So why aren't we using those algorithms and those systems within corporations to fire little 30 seconds trainings at people? So that is, in fact, absolutely possible. But to be fair to a corporation, if I'm an accountant at Bank of New York Mellon, I should be out billing at $700 an hour, not taking cybersecurity training every day. So I understand the balance and challenge that a CEO and a CFO has in governing their organization. Now, I want to get to Jeff, because we're having a conversation here with Jeff now. This is great. Jeff, thank you very much. Agreed, he says, immersing people in ongoing drills is a form of education and awareness. Right, buddy. So when people learn to drive a car, great analogy, they learn a lot when sitting in the passenger seat, but they learn a tremendous amount when you put them right behind the wheel. Exactly, my friend. That's right. It seems that most training, I love that analogy, Jeff. Thank you. I'm going to hold on to that one. Seems that training is more about being a passenger in a car. Because who's the beneficiary? Back when I was an English teacher, the actual beneficiary of the lesson was always actually me. I was the number one beneficiary because I had to plan the lesson, right? I had to think about, the English language and understand it so much that I could simplify it to my students. So I was always a teacher is always the greatest beneficiary. I think Stephen Covey's got a great point. He says, learn it, teach it, then you own it. Learn it, teach it, own it. Right. So we need to really get people to learn about cyber hygiene and then maybe go home and teach it to that's driving the car, Jeff, right? Then teach it to their family, their loved ones, or maybe you teach it to, you learn it at the team lead level. And then it's the responsibility of that team leader to teach it to their organization. Only after that point will you absolutely own it. So there's a couple of other comments coming in. Yes, hello from Kenya, a few other folks here. Here's a good one from Greg. Greg saying being mindful of the fuel you post on socials is equally important part of the awareness. Right, like I was saying, on LinkedIn, you get a CEO saying, hey, I'll be with my clients in Tokyo in 14 hours. Yeah, don't do that. Here's another one for all of you listening right now. I'm sure you're most likely in the Department of Cybersecurity, right? So go to your CEO's LinkedIn profile on LinkedIn, and there's a contact info button. And I'll bet you 90% will show their personal email address. Because it's just a click. You just need to obfuscate your email. Like, use mine as an example. Obviously, Chris and I work in an environment in which we are actually targeted by threat actors, so we tend to be buttoned down pretty hard. So if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you're not going to see much. Right? I mean, I post a lot about, cyber prevention and blah, 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 but you're not going to see much about, my personal details. It's just got my job title and that's about it. There's hardly any descriptions in there. So you might want to follow that. But again, you click on contact info. Most people just didn't click that little toggle button because LinkedIn obviously encourages everybody to share everything because this is the day we're living in. We just regurgitate all of this personal information online for threat actors to have a look at, as well as our network, of course. So that's a little tip for everybody. RC, can you post a link to the survey now, please? We're going to start to wrap up our little event here, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, and actually I just saw a comment I'm going to get from I'm going to try and pronounce this one, my friend. I hope I don't butcher it. So Sevia, even with awareness, Jeff, the bad actors will strike because they are more current when it comes to updates and technologies. I'll challenge that in a second. Whereas an average person isn't really thinking about that. Yeah, so Sevia, you're right about that. When it comes to bad actors, believe me, the good guys, the white hatters, we got this. For the most part, most people are not breached. We hear these stories, and Chris and I live in this world where, we unfortunately manage victims all the time. And so, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail, as Abraham Maslow said, right? So we see these nails everywhere. We see victims everywhere. But the reality is, Checkpoint, we have 100,000 enterprise customers, right? That's 100,000 big organizations, many millions of people, and the vast majority are safe. So look, we are winning that battle. But to your point, Sevier, the threat actors are incredibly talented. Yes, they are. And more talented than the average person who, you know, I mean, it's interesting. Gen Z are the first generation to really be co-parented by the internet. Right? Notice my vocabulary there. It's pretty savage, right? But it's real, because never before in human history has entertainment been at the fingertips of parents to just say, hey, here's an iPad, right? So that generation, Gen Z, who are currently today 10 years old to about 24 years old, because they were born in 98 and up, have been co-parented by the internet. Everybody else that's alive today after that, it's not second nature to us. Right, and so your point there, Sevier, is absolutely correct. Most people are going to be at a disadvantage, and here's the other reason why people are at a disadvantage: because the threat actor only needs to be right once. There's no penalty for a threat actor to be wrong 100% of the time. Right, it just doesn't work. They're on their phone. They've had a cup of coffee in this Starbucks all day in Africa, right? A victim, right, or a potential victim, somebody who's targeted, needs to be right 100% of the time, and there's massive penalty for being wrong once. So the odds are stacked against us in this game. So RC, throw that link up there in a few moments. All right, Chris, this has been, I think, for my audience, a brilliant dialogue, because we are so ones and zeros. We often forget, and just before this call started, you and I, when we were chatting for 2 minutes, you know, we think about colonial pipelines. We think about, you know, all these breaches that happen out there. But behind that, there are human beings that have worked incredibly hard to keep oil and gas moving, for example, in the case of that company. And it's more than having egg on their face, right? You know, these people get hurt. Right, their careers are damaged almost permanently sometimes, you know, through lack of understanding of, let's say, the executive, perhaps, to the CISO, you know, or the CISO to their people. Anyway, final kind of closing thoughts. What do you think, Chris?
So some of this might be redundant. I apologize to what the knowledge of your audience here. So I apologize about it, but it's really important to not say. I mean, you just have to be cognizant about who you are in the professional world, right? And we're not even talking about you being penetrated as a person, right? Just as an individual. Can Chris give $5,000 to somebody, right? It has nothing to do with our professional world. But if you can be cognizant of your role in the professional world on a regular basis, again, not paranoid, but just be cognizant of where you stand in potentially a bad actor's mindset, you know, when they look at you as potentially a victim. And just kind of carry that out both in your professional world and your personal world, to try to stand up as much guard, as much layers of security as possible with your postings online, with your privatizing of your accounts, with never talk about where you're going to vacation. Never talk about where you're going to travel, okay? Because that does two things. It tells a bad actor where you're going, and it tells a bad actor where you're not going to be. So you want to be careful with that. If you want to post photos of you in Mexico or Fiji or whatever like that, do it afterwards. Talk about your engagements there. Hey, have fun with it. You know, we're kind of more talking about the personal side of that. But again, bad actors have pivoted because they can't afford the resources to take down a conglomerate security apparatus. So they pivot to the private side of the individual that they think may be key in allowing them to springboard into that conglomerate, that company that they ultimately want to engage in. Because if you think about it, you had mentioned, you know, some bad actors looking at your computer staying stale for 211 days because they're just netting in all this intelligence. They're learning about you. They're learning about your company. They're learning about your executive team there. You know, you want to make sure that you don't feed them as much information as possible to work against you. You know, spear phishing, how do they do that? They do that by personalizing the attack specific to you. And why do they do that? Because it works. Because if you think that you have this personalized amount of information come to you, you more trust that person. Right, because they can gain a heightened level of familiarity with you. This person knows me, right? And then that leads to the whole romance scams we're talking about, just scams in general. So you just got to be careful with everything that you put there online. You know, you get a new house, everyone's super thankful for that, you know, very grateful for that. Check out my new house. It's got the numerical portion on it. You go to 411.com, it gives you the street, but not the numerical portion of it. You put 2 and 2 together, you have the whole address there. So you just got to be very careful with what you do online, your lifestyle online.
Right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have to wrap this, but it's just been an absolutely fantastic session. So in the comments, this should be clickable in the comments. You can certainly go to the Survey Monkey there. We want to thank you by offering you first come, first serve. There's a limited number. I don't know how many it is. There's lots of them, mind you. $20 Starbucks coupons that will be sent to you through Starbucks somehow, some kind of e-ticket. So just fill out that survey there, because we also want to help give you more information about this. If you loved this session, then let us know in the comments. It lives forever in the archive, and we'll continue to farm through the comments. So we are listening to you. And although Chris is doing 80 hours a week, we'll get him back for another one. We'll add 81 hours. 80 is not enough, buddy. Real heroes do 81. So that's that piece right there. There's I think that's the same link, so that should be clickable. There's a little dialogue going on between RC and a couple of others, and there's an email address there at Yahoo. Not sure. I won't post that because I'm never sure with emails, given the business we're in. But you can see it in the comments too. So, Chris, I want to. Oh, we're right on the button for an hour. Chris, I want to thank you, man. That's really cool. I know you've been, just as I say, 8 hours a week. I'm very grateful. I really am. I found it super fascinating. I love what you're doing. I love the fact there are people out there like you who are constantly in the danger zone, battling to help victims recover money, help victims prevent future crime from occurring to them. And so where can people find you on LinkedIn? What's the easiest way to get to you if an organization has a need for your forensic services, my friend?
Sure. Yeah, we do proactive and reactive engagements. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Christopher Salgado, Salgado in Tampa, with All Points Investigations.
Beautiful. All Points Investigations in Tampa. Chris, thank you for that again. Ladies and gentlemen, much appreciated. I'm going to end the broadcast there, but we love doing these LinkedIn live shows. Let us know what other services, information you need. We are here to serve you. So Eddie Doyle from Checkpoint, checking out. Good stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eddie.